Hi, Tyler. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How about yourself?
I'm all right. Now, tell the good people, who are you and what do you do here?
My name is Tyler Sterling, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as our National Campaigns Director.
So it was a slow week here, wasn't it? We just had an election or whatever.
Yeah. Elections everywhere. I think oftentimes we think of these off years. The odd years are seen as off years, but we have no days off here. Always an election to be had, and we're very pleased with some of the turnout and results that we've seen.
Yeah, so everyone is sort of talking about this kind of shift in just dynamics and the people that we have in power. But you actually have been doing such great work around mobilizing people, making sure that they knew that there were elections going on. So can you speak from, an NAACP standpoint about like what really went into making sure that people turned up at the polls this week?
Yeah, thank you very much. So. A core piece of all of the NAACP mobilization and the work that my team leads is data analysis first. So, as I said, there are elections everywhere, but a part of what we do is making sure that we are talking to the right voters, the right black voters. We've got the right phone numbers, data analysis, and be able to determine, excuse me, to be able to determine where high population black geographies and dense geographies are of voters to really turn out the vote. And so it starts from a full team approach. So our advocacy team was doing town halls on the ground prior to election season in three of our key states. Those would be California, Virginia, and New Jersey. So looking at the data analysis, we looked at where are movable voters? What are conversations? What are the top issues at mind for them? And our advocacy team came in on beforehand or before the elections with our units. So I cannot forget our units. Advocacy team working with the units on doing our community education. And then that makes it a whole lot easier for my team to come in and say, hey, we know you've been having conversations with folks. Now let's talk about getting out to vote. So it makes
Yeah.
my team's work a little easier to then get the election messaging because these voters have already had communication and engagement with our units on the ground.
Yeah, and so you said data is a big part of what you do. Was there anything that stuck out to you prior to the elections while you were out actively mobilizing people? And is there anything that stuck out to you from what we're seeing? I know it's still early days, but anything that stuck out to you afterwards?
I'll start backwards. So after the election, in Virginia in particular, we had 13 priority districts, 13 House districts where we knew and saw black voters could potentially sway the outcome or their engagement would
Okay.
ensure that we would have turnout. And so we actually 13 of 13 had their increased black voter turnout, and all 13 saw an electoral victory. So that was amazing to see on our outcome side. And then on the interesting things going into the election. I don't think too much was like shocking. Voters were very concerned about the current state of our federal gridlock. And so
Okay.
really
Yeah.
emphasizing how important local elections are was that through line there that when you think about the attacks that we are seeing from the National Guard, from ICE, from invaders in our community, tying that to the fact that your attorney general is your first defender in your state to prevent those type of issues and that type of overreach. So it was tying those things and what we're seeing at a federal level to the impacts on local elections was really how we were able to drive those outcomes. So it wasn't necessarily surprising to see that, but I think it was helpful to make those connections because voters and myself often get tied up in everyday life and think,
Yeah.
oh, what's happening in DC, it's not really going to be affected me or is not necessarily an outcome of what's happening locally. And so really educating and trying to tie all those pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from what we've seen now, can you explain to us a little bit the election results from in your perspective?
Yeah, in my perspective, young voters turned out. Young voters turned out. Women turned out exponentially high. Black women, who always hold it down, are always going to show up and turned out. But I think what was very interesting to me is that we are seeing a shift towards progressive candidates or progressive values and ideology, meaning that some counties that in particular, like a state like Virginia, Virginia is often seen as like a bellwether. How Virginia
Yeah.
goes is how potentially the country is going to go. But really, we saw some areas that were traditionally more conservative leaning, leaking votes, if you will, to progressive side candidates. And so that was interesting to me to see that areas that traditionally would be a stronghold for conservative values and ideologies are kind of releasing that, or at least being curious to what a progressive policies and platforms mean to them.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen and heard that as well. So now what happens? The next set of elections, there are some people going into runoffs, I think, but the next really big election day is 2026, which is a really going to be a consequential midterm elections for folks. What do we do? Do we just sit tight for 365 days, or is there any action we can take?
Yeah, there is a ton of action. I do not think now is the time. We certainly want to take a collective pause. I want to
Okay.
pat ourselves on the back for a vote for democracy. If you voted this year, I hope you voted for democracy and for progress and for change. But we're going to take a quick breather and a collective sigh, and then we're right back into work. So at the top of the year, when we're in state legislative seasons, really trying to emphasize that state legislative authority and how the ties, as I said earlier, like tying what is happening in local government to federal gains or perhaps federal losses, and how to interweave those into voting for your federal electeds in 2026. So at the association, our first steps start with data analysis again. Where are the House districts? Where are the statewide elections that we know if an increased Black voter turnout can happen, that we're going to impact the local geography for better, for good. So we're going to start with data analysis. People are wondering how to get involved. We are recruiting volunteers already. This volunteer program that we run every year, we start early. We start earlier and earlier, and I think there is no better time than right now, after building off of this energy, to sign up with the NAACP. So we start with our data analysis. Then after data analysis, we move into messaging and research. So wondering what are the top lines, what are the top of mind issues for voters. That can often switch after an election time. So in between the holidays and the top of the year, folks may have different concerns. So we always want to make sure we root our work in data analysis, or sorry, in messaging and research and what folks are actually listening to and attuned to. And then once we have that messaging and research, it is all things a go, creating scripts, talking points, and getting people out to volunteer. So next steps from us, data analysis, diving heavy into the state legislative advocacy work and tying those to federal outcomes. And then as we move out of state legislative season, it is all things GOTV. So now is not a time to take too much of a break. I said, we're going to get that collective pause. We're going to have that sigh of relief, rest up, and get ready for 2026.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tyler. And if it hasn't already been said, outstanding job this week, this year. We know we're going to continue to do great things together. Where can the people find you for more information?
People can find me at naacp.org. That is, I'm on the website there. My team is constantly pushing out notifications. So one of the ways that I think that the best way to stay in touch with our team is to text the word volunteer to 20707, where you'll get all the updates from my team and the association-wide updates on how to get plugged in and how to keep moving.
Thank you. See you next time.